The morning mist hung low over Windsor Castle as Princess Catherine walked through the ancient corridors, her footsteps echoing softly against the stone floors. She had been summoned to an urgent meeting with Prince William, though the nature of the discussion remained unclear. The palace staff moved with unusual purpose, whispering in hushed tones as they passed ornate portraits of monarchs, long departed, in the private study overlooking the castle grounds. Prince William stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the manicured gardens. The weight of recent events pressed heavily on his shoulders. The upcoming state visit from the President of France had taken on new significance. Following unexpected diplomatic developments in Europe, what should have been a routine ceremonial occasion had transformed into a critical moment for British foreign relations. Catherine knocked gently before entering, noting the tension in her husband's posture immediately. Years of marriage had taught her to read his moods, and today something was deeply troubling him. The usual warmth in his eyes was replaced by a mixture of determination and concern that she had rarely seen before. "The French delegation has made an unusual request," William began without preamble. Turning to face his wife, "They want to discuss the new European Defense Treaty during their visit. President Macron believes this is the perfect opportunity to strengthen our alliance. But the timing couldn't be more delicate." Catherine settled into the leather chair across from his desk, her mind already processing the implications. State visits were carefully choreographed affairs with every moment planned months in advance. Any deviation from protocol required extraordinary justification, and the addition of serious diplomatic negotiations would transform the entire nature of the event. "The Prime Minister is concerned about appearing too eager," William continued, running a hand through his hair. "But if we miss this opportunity, it could set back Anglo-French relations for years. The Americans are watching closely, and Brussels is already questioning our commitment to European cooperation post-Brexit." The complexity of the situation began to unfold as William explained the delicate balance required. Traditional state visits involved both senior royals sharing duties equally, presenting a united front while maintaining the ceremonial dignity expected by both nations. However, the current circumstances demanded a different approach entirely. "I've been thinking about this all night," William said, moving to stand beside the window again. "What if we break with tradition? What if instead of the usual joint representation, we designate a single primary representative who can navigate both the ceremonial requirements and the diplomatic subtleties?" Catherine raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the unconventional suggestion. Royal protocol had governed such events for centuries, with established precedents for nearly every conceivable situation. The idea of deliberately departing from these time-honored traditions would certainly raise eyebrows both within the palace and among foreign observers. "The French respect strong, decisive leadership," William continued, his voice gaining confidence as he outlined his reasoning. "They appreciate individuals who can command a room and engage in substantive discussions while maintaining the appropriate level of formality. This isn't about pageantry anymore. It's about demonstrating that the British monarchy can adapt and remain relevant in modern diplomacy." The implications were staggering. Whoever took on this role would essentially be representing not just the royal family, but the entire United Kingdom in one of the most important diplomatic exchanges of the year. The pressure would be immense, with every word and gesture scrutinized by international media and foreign policy experts. Catherine found herself considering the various members of the royal family who might be suitable for such a responsibility. Each brought different strengths and weaknesses to the table. The choice would inevitably send a message about the monarchy's priorities and future direction. "Who did you have in mind?" she asked carefully, though something in William's expression suggested he had already made his decision. William returned to his desk, picking up a folder containing detailed briefing materials about the French delegation and their objectives. The documents represented weeks of preparation by Foreign Office officials, intelligence analysts, and protocol experts. Every aspect of the visit had been meticulously planned, from the timing of arrivals to the specific topics likely to arise in conversations. "Someone who understands both tradition and innovation," he said slowly. "Someone who can represent our values while demonstrating that we're ready for the challenges of the 21st century. Someone who has proven capable of handling unexpected situations with grace and intelligence. The weight of his words hung in the air as Catherine began to understand the direction of his thinking. The choice of representative would be seen as a statement about the future of the monarchy itself, and the criteria William had outlined seemed to point toward a very specific conclusion. Outside, the morning mist was beginning to clear, revealing the full splendor of the castle grounds. Gardeners moved methodically across the lawns, preparing for the influx of visitors and photographers that would accompany any major royal announcement. The peaceful scene belied the momentous decision being contemplated within the ancient walls. "This could change everything," Catherine said quietly. Recognizing the potential impact of such an unprecedented move, "Are you certain this is the right approach?" William nodded firmly, his resolve clearly strengthened by their discussion. "Sometimes the greatest service we can provide is knowing when to break with the past in order to secure the future. This visit will be remembered for decades, and I want to ensure it's remembered for the right reasons." The conversation had reached a crucial juncture, with both participants aware that they stood at a crossroads that would influence not only the upcoming state visit, but potentially the trajectory of the monarchy itself. The decision, once made, would be irreversible, setting precedents that future generations would either build upon or struggle to overcome. As Catherine prepared to respond, the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor reminded them both that the palace was already beginning its daily routine. Soon, staff members would require guidance on the final arrangements for the French visit, and any changes to the established plan would need to be communicated clearly and decisively. The moment of decision had arrived, and the future of Anglo-French diplomatic relations hung in the balance of their conversation. The silence stretched between them as Catherine processed the magnitude of what William was proposing. Through the tall windows, she could see the morning sun breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the ancient courtyard where countless royal decisions had been made throughout history. This moment would join that legacy, for better or worse. "You're suggesting that I take on the primary role?" Catherine said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the implications. It wasn't a question, but rather an acknowledgement of the unspoken conclusion they had both reached during their conversation. William moved around the desk to sit across from her, his expression serious but supportive. "The French delegation specifically mentioned their admiration for your handling of the climate summit last year. Ambassador Rousseau told me personally that your ability to bridge diplomatic protocol with genuine engagement impressed President Macron considerably." Catherine remembered that event well. What was supposed to be a brief ceremonial appearance had turned into an impromptu 3-hour discussion about sustainable development policies when several world leaders became unexpectedly available for informal talks. Rather than retreat to safer, scripted interactions, she had chosen to engage substantively with complex policy issues, earning respect from delegates who had initially expected nothing more than polite pleasantries. "This situation is entirely different," Catherine pointed out. Though her mind was already working through the potential challenges and opportunities, a state visit carries far more weight than a climate conference. Every word will be analyzed, every gesture interpreted. If something goes wrong, it won't just reflect on me personally. The weight of representing the entire monarchy in such a crucial diplomatic moment was not lost on either of them. Traditional state visits distributed this pressure across multiple family members, allowing for shared responsibility and reduced individual exposure. By concentrating everything on a single representative, they would be amplifying both the potential for success and the consequences of any missteps. William leaned forward, his voice taking on the passionate tone Catherine recognized from their private discussions about modernizing the monarchy. "That's exactly why this approach makes sense. Instead of diluting our message across multiple representatives, we present a unified voice. The French will know exactly who they're dealing with, and there won't be any confusion about our priorities or positions." The strategic logic was compelling, but Catherine couldn't ignore the practical challenges that would arise. Royal protocol existed for reasons beyond mere tradition. It provided structure and predictability that helped prevent diplomatic incidents. Departing from these established norms would require exceptional preparation and flawless execution. What does the private secretary think about this? Catherine asked, referring to the senior palace official responsible for managing royal schedules and ensuring protocol compliance. Sir Geoffrey Hartwell had served the royal family for over 2 decades and was known for his meticulous attention to detail and strong preference for conventional approaches. William's expression grew slightly uncomfortable. I haven't discussed it with him yet. I wanted to speak with you first, to make sure you were willing to consider the role before involving the broader palace staff. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation. Sir Geoffrey's support would be crucial for managing the logistical challenges of such an unprecedented arrangement. His extensive experience with diplomatic protocol and foreign delegation management made him indispensable. But his conservative approach to royal duties might put him at odds with such a radical departure from tradition. He'll have concerns, Catherine said diplomatically, knowing that Sir Geoffrey's reaction would likely be far stronger than mere concern. The security implications alone will require completely restructuring the usual arrangements. The mention of security brought additional considerations into focus. State visits involved multiple layers of protection, from personal bodyguards to crowd control measures. Concentrating all attention on a single royal representative would require enhanced security protocols and careful coordination with French security services to ensure nothing went wrong during the high-profile diplomatic exchanges. Catherine stood and walked to the window. Looking out at the same view that had captured William's attention earlier, the grounds were now bustling with activity as the daily operations of the castle continued around them. Gardeners, maintenance staff, and security personnel all played their parts in maintaining the carefully constructed image of royal stability and competence. There's something else we need to consider, Catherine said slowly. The media reaction will be intense. They'll either portray this as a bold modernization of the monarchy or as evidence that we're abandoning our traditional responsibilities. The media aspect was perhaps the most unpredictable element of the entire proposition. Royal correspondents thrived on analyzing every deviation from established norms. And such a significant departure from traditional state visit protocols would generate headlines for weeks. The narrative that emerged from their coverage could shape public perception of the monarchy for years to come. William joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could sense his determination despite his acknowledgement of the risks involved. We can't make decisions based on fear of media criticism. If we believe this is the right approach for strengthening Britain's international relationships, then we have an obligation to pursue it, regardless of how it might be portrayed. The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. William called for the visitor to enter, and Sir Geoffrey himself appeared, carrying a leather portfolio filled with documents related to the upcoming French visit. His timing seemed almost supernatural, as though he had sensed the important discussion taking place in the study. "Your Royal Highnesses, sir," Geoffrey said, with his customary formal courtesy. "I apologize for the interruption, but the French embassy has requested a preliminary meeting to discuss final arrangements for President Macron's visit. They seem particularly interested in confirming the specific roles that each of you will be playing during the various ceremonial events." Catherine and William exchanged glances, both recognizing that the moment of decision had arrived sooner than expected. The French delegation's inquiry could not be postponed indefinitely, and any changes to the established protocol need to be communicated immediately to allow for proper preparation on both sides. "Actually, Sir Geoffrey," William said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that indicated a formal decision was about to be announced, "we've been discussing some modifications to the usual arrangements. Please, take a seat. We need to discuss a new approach to the state visit protocols." Sir Geoffrey's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of his surprise at this unexpected development. His years of service had taught him to maintain perfect composure, regardless of circumstances. But Catherine could sense his immediate concern about any last-minute changes to carefully laid diplomatic plans. The private secretary settled into his usual chair, opened his portfolio, and prepared to take notes with the methodical precision that had made him invaluable to the royal family. Whatever was about to be proposed, he would ensure that every detail was properly documented and that all necessary preparations were completed flawlessly. The next few minutes would determine not just the structure of the upcoming state visit, but potentially the future direction of royal diplomatic engagement. Sir Geoffrey positioned his fountain pen above his notepad with the practiced precision of someone who had recorded countless royal decisions over the years. His expression remained carefully neutral, though Catherine detected a slight tightness around his eyes that suggested he was preparing himself for something significant and potentially challenging. French visit presents an unusual opportunity, William began, his tone measured but decisive. Recent developments in European politics have elevated this from a standard ceremonial occasion to a crucial diplomatic moment. President Macron has specifically requested that we incorporate substantive policy discussions into the traditional state visit framework. Sir Geoffrey made careful notes, his pen moving steadily across the page as he captured every detail. His decades of experience had taught him that seemingly minor changes to royal protocol often had far-reaching consequences, and he approached each modification with appropriate gravity. Given the elevated importance of these discussions, William continued, we believe that a more focused approach would better serve Britain's interests. Rather than dividing responsibilities between multiple family members, we propose designating Princess Catherine as the primary royal representative for the entire visit. Sir Geoffrey looked up from his notes, his professional composure wavering slightly as he processed the unprecedented nature of this proposal. State visits had followed established protocols for generations, with roles carefully distributed to maintain ceremonial balance while avoiding overwhelming any single participant. Your Royal Highness, sir, Geoffrey said carefully, such an arrangement would represent a significant departure from established precedent. The logistical implications alone would require substantial modifications to our security protocols, media management strategies, and diplomatic coordination procedures. Catherine stepped forward, recognizing that Sir Geoffrey's concerns needed to be addressed directly and thoroughly. We understand the challenges this presents, Sir Geoffrey. That's precisely why we wanted to discuss this with you before making any final commitments. Your expertise will be crucial in determining whether such an arrangement is feasible. The private secretary's mind was clearly working through the myriad complexities such a change would introduce. His role involved anticipating and preventing potential problems before they could impact the royal family's reputation or Britain's diplomatic relationships. This proposal seemed designed to maximize both opportunities and risks simultaneously. The French delegation's expectations will need to be managed very carefully, Sir Geoffrey observed, his tone reflecting years of experience navigating delicate international relationships. They have prepared for a traditional state visit structure. Ambassador Rousseau specifically mentioned his anticipation of the usual ceremonial distribution of duties. William moved to his desk and retrieved a folder containing recent correspondence with the French embassy. Actually, their recent communications suggest they might welcome this approach. The ambassador specifically praised Princess Catherine's engagement style during the climate summit, noting that President Macron found her combination of formal protocol and substantive knowledge particularly effective. This revelation seemed to shift Sir Geoffrey's perspective slightly. His extensive network of diplomatic contacts had undoubtedly provided him with insights into French preferences and expectations. If the visiting delegation had expressed genuine appreciation for Catherine's diplomatic style, the risks associated with this unconventional approach might be more manageable than initially apparent. Catherine sensed an opportunity to address Sir Geoffrey's underlying concerns more directly. I want to emphasize that this wouldn't involve abandoning protocol or ceremonial traditions. Rather, we're proposing a concentration of responsibilities that would allow for deeper engagement while maintaining all the formal elements that make state visits meaningful. The distinction was important. Royal protocol served multiple purposes beyond mere tradition. It provided structure that helped prevent misunderstandings, ensured appropriate respect was shown to visiting dignitaries, and maintained the dignity that made such events diplomatically significant. Any successful modification would need to preserve these essential functions while adapting to new circumstances. Sir Geoffrey resumed taking notes, though his writing pace suggested he was still processing the implications of what was being proposed. The media briefing strategy would require complete reconstruction, he observed. Royal correspondents have established expectations about state visit coverage patterns. They'll need advance notice of any significant changes to avoid confusion during the actual events. Media management aspect was particularly complex because royal correspondents operated under informal but well-established protocols of their own. They knew where to position themselves, which events to cover most intensively, and how to interpret various ceremonial elements. Disrupting these patterns without proper preparation could lead to coverage gaps or inappropriate focus on less significant moments. "We're prepared to provide whatever briefings are necessary," William assured him. "The goal is to enhance the diplomatic effectiveness of the visit, not to create confusion or complications for anyone involved." Sir Geoffrey looked up from his notes, his expression thoughtful rather than concerned. "There is precedent for modified protocols during exceptional circumstances. The 1982 Reagan visit involved several departures from tradition due to security concerns, and the 2019 Trump visit required adaptive approaches to accommodate that administration's particular preferences." Catherine felt a surge of optimism at this acknowledgement. If Sir Geoffrey could identify historical precedents, suggested that the proposal wasn't entirely unprecedented, merely unusual. His institutional memory and deep understanding of protocol flexibility would be invaluable in developing a workable framework. "What would be your primary concerns about implementation?" Catherine asked, hoping to identify potential obstacles before they became actual problems. "Sir." Geoffrey consulted his notes briefly before responding. "Security coordination would be the most immediate challenge. Concentrating all attention on a single representative requires enhanced protection protocols and closer cooperation with French security services. The ceremonial timing would also need adjustment. Since many traditional elements assume multiple participants, these were practical concerns rather than fundamental objections," which suggested that Sir Geoffrey was beginning to view the proposal as challenging but potentially manageable rather than impossible. His willingness to engage with implementation details indicated that he was moving beyond initial skepticism toward problem-solving mode. "The palace staff would need comprehensive briefings," Sir Geoffrey continued. "From household management to protocol officers, everyone would need to understand how their usual responsibilities might change. The French embassy would also require detailed explanations to ensure their preparations align with our modified approach." William leaned forward, sensing that they were approaching a crucial moment in the discussion. "Are you saying this could work, Sir Geoffrey?" The private secretary was quiet for several moments, clearly weighing multiple factors simultaneously. His response would carry enormous weight, since his opposition would make implementation nearly impossible, while his support would provide the institutional expertise necessary for success. "It could work," Sir Geoffrey said slowly, "but only with extraordinary preparation and flawless execution. Every detail would need to be planned meticulously, with contingencies for various scenarios that might arise during the actual visit." Catherine felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension at this conditional endorsement. The opportunity to represent Britain in such a significant diplomatic moment was both thrilling and daunting, particularly given the heightened expectations that would accompany such an unconventional arrangement. The conversation had reached a turning point, with the practical possibility of the proposal now established, but the final commitment still pending. The atmosphere in the study had shifted from cautious deliberation to focused planning, as Sir Geoffrey's conditional approval opened the door to serious implementation discussions. Catherine could feel the weight of the decision settling around them like a mantle she was preparing to wear, bringing both privilege and immense responsibility. "If we proceed with this arrangement," Sir Geoffrey continued, his tone becoming more businesslike as he shifted into operational mode, "we'll need to begin preparations immediately. The French delegation arrives in exactly 3 weeks, which provides minimal time for the extensive coordination this will require." William nodded, understanding the compressed timeline they would be working under. What would need to happen first? Sir Geoffrey consulted his notebook, where he had been sketching preliminary organizational charts during their conversation. The security assessment must be completed within 48 hours. Inspector Morrison will need to review every aspect of the visit itinerary with this new responsibility distribution in mind. The close protection arrangements alone will require significant modification. Catherine had worked with Inspector Morrison many times and respected his thoroughness and professionalism. She knew he would approach this challenge with the same meticulous attention to detail that had kept the royal family safe through countless public appearances and international engagements. However, the concentrated focus of this arrangement would test even his considerable expertise. The diplomatic briefings will be intensive, Sir Geoffrey continued, making additional notes as he spoke. Ambassador Rousseau will need to understand exactly how this modified protocol affects his delegation's expectations and preparations. The LEC Palace will undoubtedly want detailed explanations before approving such an unusual arrangement. The international diplomatic dimension added layers of complexity that extended far beyond British royal protocol. French presidential protocol had its own traditions and expectations, and President Macron's team would need to coordinate their preparations with this new approach while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that made state visits diplomatically valuable. Catherine realized that her preparation would need to extend far beyond the usual briefings about French culture and current political issues. I'll need comprehensive policy briefings on the European Defense Treaty, she said, thinking aloud. If substantive discussions are going to be part of this visit, I need to understand every nuance of our negotiating position. This requirement would involve coordination with the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Defense, and potentially intelligence services who monitored European political developments. The depth of preparation would rival that required for formal diplomatic negotiations. Combining the ceremonial expertise expected of royal representatives with the policy knowledge typically reserved for professional diplomats. Sir. Geoffrey looked up from his notes with a slight smile. Foreign Secretary Hartley has been hoping for months to find an appropriate venue for advancing those treaty discussions. When he learns that a state visit might provide that opportunity, he'll ensure you have access to every briefing document and policy analysis in Whitehall. The mention of Foreign Secretary Hartley brought another crucial player into the equation. His support would be essential not just for accessing necessary briefing materials, but for ensuring that the diplomatic aspects of the visit aligned with broader British foreign policy objectives. The Foreign Office's expertise would be invaluable in navigating the complex intersection of ceremonial tradition and substantive diplomacy. There's another consideration we haven't addressed, Catherine said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. How do we handle the family dynamics of this decision? Other family members were expecting to participate in this visit according to the usual arrangements. William had been dreading this aspect of the conversation, knowing that departing from traditional role distributions would inevitably create disappointment and potentially hurt feelings. Among family members who had been anticipating their usual state visit responsibilities, royal protocol existed partly to ensure that duties and honors were shared appropriately within the family structure. Sir, Geoffrey's expression became diplomatically neutral, a sure sign that he understood the delicate nature of internal family dynamics. That conversation will require considerable sensitivity. The Queen will need to be informed immediately, and her approval will be essential before any final commitments are made. The mention of the Queen added the ultimate level of gravity to their deliberations. Her decades of experience with state visits and international diplomacy made her opinion both invaluable and potentially decisive. If she disapproved of such a significant departure from traditional protocol, the entire proposal would need to be reconsidered regardless of its practical merits. Grandmother has been encouraging us to modernize our approach to royal duties, William said thoughtfully. During our last conversation about the monarchy's future, she specifically mentioned the importance of adapting to contemporary diplomatic needs while maintaining our essential traditions. This recollection provided some optimism about the Queen's potential response, though Catherine knew that abstract approval of modernization was different from endorsing specific dramatic changes to established protocols. The Queen's support would need to be earned through detailed explanations of the diplomatic benefits and careful attention to maintaining appropriate ceremonial dignity. I suggest we request a private audience. "With Her Majesty this afternoon?" Sir Geoffrey proposed. "If we're going to proceed, her approval should be secured before we begin the intensive preparation process. Ambassador Rousseau is expecting our response to his delegation's requests by tomorrow evening." The compressed timeline was beginning to feel overwhelming. Less than 24 hours remained before they would need to provide definitive answers to the French embassy. Yet the approval process and preparation requirements could easily extend for weeks under normal circumstances. Every aspect of their planning would need to be accelerated without compromising the thoroughness that diplomatic success required. Catherine felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as the reality of the situation crystallized. If they proceeded, she would be stepping into a role that no royal family member had undertaken in living memory, representing Britain in diplomatic discussions of genuine international importance while maintaining all the ceremonial responsibilities that made state visits meaningful. "There's one more factor we should consider," William said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. "Catherine, are you certain you want to take this on? The pressure will be intense, and there won't be opportunities to share difficult moments with other family members, as there usually are during state visits." The question forced Catherine to confront her own feelings about the proposed arrangement. Beyond its strategic merits, royal duties had always been shared responsibilities, providing mutual support during challenging moments and distributing both successes and any potential failures across multiple participants. Accepting sole responsibility would mean facing everything alone. She looked out the window again, watching the ground staff continue their preparations for the countless visitors and events that filled the castle's calendar. Each of them performed their duties with dedication and professionalism, contributing to the larger mission of maintaining the monarchy's effectiveness and relevance. This decision would be her contribution to that same mission. "I think I'm ready," Catherine said quietly. "It's frightening, but it's also exactly the kind of challenge that could demonstrate the monarchy's continued relevance in contemporary international relations." Sir Geoffrey made a final note and closed his portfolio with the decisive gesture that indicated the preliminary discussion phase was complete. "Then we should proceed with requesting Her Majesty's audience. If she approves, we'll have our answer to Ambassador Rousseau, and we can begin the most intensive 3 weeks of preparation in recent royal history." The moment of final commitment was approaching rapidly, with consequences that would extend far beyond the upcoming French visit. The private audience with the Queen had been scheduled for 4 o'clock that afternoon in her private sitting room at Windsor Castle. As Catherine and William made their way through the familiar corridors, both felt the weight of the conversation ahead. The Queen's approval was not merely a formality. Her extensive experience with international diplomacy and deep understanding of constitutional precedents made her perspective genuinely crucial to their decision-making process. Catherine had attended countless family meetings in this same sitting room, but today the familiar chintz furniture and family photographs seemed to carry additional gravity. The room had witnessed decades of important royal decisions, from succession planning to constitutional crises, and today's discussion would add another significant moment to its history. The Queen entered with her customary brisk efficiency, gesturing for them to take their usual seats while she settled into her preferred armchair near the window. Her expression was attentive, but gave no indication of her thoughts about the proposal that Sir Geoffrey had outlined to her private secretary. "Earlier that morning, Sir Geoffrey has provided me with a preliminary briefing about your proposed modifications to the French state visit." The Queen began without preamble. "I understand that you wish to concentrate all primary responsibilities on Catherine, rather than following the traditional distribution of duties." William leaned forward slightly, his tone respectful but confident. "We believe this approach would better serve Britain's diplomatic interests, particularly given the substantive policy discussions that President Macron wishes to incorporate into the visit." The Queen's slight nod indicated that she had already considered this strategic rationale. Her decades of experience with state visits had given her deep insights into their diplomatic effectiveness, and she understood better than anyone how ceremonial Traditions could either enhance or impede substantive international relationships. The precedent concerns me less than the practical considerations, the Queen said thoughtfully. State visits succeed when they achieve their diplomatic objectives, while maintaining appropriate dignity and protocol. If this arrangement enhances our ability to accomplish both goals, then tradition should not prevent us from pursuing it. Catherine felt a surge of relief at this measured response. The Queen's willingness to prioritize diplomatic effectiveness over traditional precedent suggested that she understood the changing nature of international relationships and the monarchy's role in supporting British foreign policy objectives. The Queen continued, her tone becoming more serious. The preparation requirements will be extraordinary. Catherine, you understand that you would be carrying the full weight of Britain's diplomatic reputation during these discussions. There would be no opportunity to defer difficult questions or share challenging moments with other family members. Directness of this observation focused Catherine's attention on the personal implications of accepting such responsibility. Royal duties typically provided built-in support systems, with family members able to assist each other when unexpected situations arose during public engagements. This arrangement would eliminate those safety nets entirely. I understand the risks, Your Majesty, Catherine replied carefully, but I also believe that the potential benefits justify accepting those challenges. The French delegation has specifically expressed appreciation for direct, substantive engagement rather than purely ceremonial interactions. The Queen studied her granddaughter-in-law's expression for several moments, clearly assessing her resolve and confidence. Royal responsibilities required not just willingness, but genuine capability. And the Queen's approval would depend on her conviction that Catherine could handle the unprecedented pressures this role would involve. The media scrutiny will be intense, the Queen observed. Every aspect of your performance will be analyzed not just as individual diplomatic interactions, but as indicators of the monarchy's future direction. Are you prepared for that level of public examination? This consideration had been weighing heavily on Catherine's mind since the morning's discussion began. Royal correspondents were skilled at identifying broader narratives within specific events, and this departure from traditional protocol would inevitably be interpreted as evidence of larger changes within the monarchy's approach to its public duties. Scrutiny is inevitable regardless of how we structured the visit, William interjected. At least this way. We're proactively demonstrating our commitment to effective diplomacy rather than simply reacting to external pressures for modernization. The Queen's expression suggested she found this argument compelling. Her own reign had required constant navigation between traditional expectations and contemporary realities, and she understood the delicate balance required to maintain institutional legitimacy while adapting to changing circumstances. Very well, the Queen said after a moment of contemplation. You have my approval to proceed, with several conditions. First, the preparation process must be absolutely thorough. No detail can be overlooked, and contingency plans must exist for various scenarios that might arise during the actual visit. Catherine nodded earnestly, understanding that the Queen's support came with corresponding expectations for flawless execution. Royal family members were expected to perform their duties with excellence under all circumstances, and this arrangement would amplify those expectations considerably. Second, the Queen continued, regular progress briefings must be provided throughout the preparation period. If significant problems emerge, we must be prepared to modify or abandon this approach rather than risk diplomatic embarrassment. This requirement reflected the Queen's practical wisdom about managing complex situations. Her support was conditional rather than absolute, providing flexibility to adjust course if unexpected challenges proved insurmountable during the preparation process. Finally, the Queen said, her tone taking on the authority that had guided the monarchy through decades of change and challenge, this arrangement must succeed completely. A partial success or modest failure would be interpreted as evidence that such innovations are inappropriate, potentially preventing future necessary adaptations to royal protocol. The pressure inherent in this final condition was enormous. Success would validate the approach and potentially open doors for other modernizing initiatives within royal duties. Failure, however, would likely reinforce conservative approaches to protocol and limit future opportunities for innovation within the monarchy's public role. Catherine felt the full weight of these expectations settling around her. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, she found herself energized by the clarity of the challenge ahead. The next 3 weeks would test every aspect of her preparation, intelligence, and diplomatic instincts. But the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to British foreign policy made the risks worthwhile. "Thank you, Your Majesty," William said formally. "We won't disappoint your confidence in this decision." The Queen stood, indicating that the formal portion of their meeting was concluded. But her expression softened slightly as she addressed Catherine directly. "You have consistently demonstrated excellent judgment and genuine capability in your royal duties. I have every confidence that you will represent Britain with distinction during this visit." As they prepared to leave the sitting room, Catherine realized that she had just committed to one of the most significant challenges of her royal career. The next 3 weeks would determine not just the success of a single diplomatic event, but potentially the future direction of royal involvement in international relations. The conversation with Ambassador Rousseau was scheduled for the following morning, and their response would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in an unprecedented diplomatic experiment with consequences extending far beyond the state visit itself. 3 weeks later, Princess Catherine stood in her private dressing room at Buckingham Palace, making final adjustments to her appearance before the most important diplomatic engagement of her royal career. The pale morning light, filtering through the tall windows, illuminated the carefully chosen ensemble that represented months of consultation between palace protocol officers and diplomatic advisors. The preparation period had been a whirlwind of intensive briefings, protocol rehearsals, and strategic planning sessions that had consumed every available moment of her schedule. Foreign Office officials had provided comprehensive policy briefings covering every aspect of Anglo-French relations. From trade agreements to defense cooperation initiatives, her private study had been transformed into a temporary command center, with classified documents, diplomatic analyses, and detailed itineraries covering every available surface. Inspector Morrison's security arrangements had required complete reconstruction of traditional state visit protocols. The concentrated focus on a single royal representative had necessitated enhanced close protection measures and unprecedented coordination with French security services. Every movement had been choreographed and rehearsed multiple times to ensure seamless execution while maintaining the appropriate level of ceremonial dignity. The morning's first engagement was scheduled to begin in precisely 45 minutes with President Macron's official arrival at Buckingham Palace. Catherine had reviewed the detailed schedule countless times, but she found herself checking it once more as her lady-in-waiting made final adjustments to her appearance. The state welcome ceremony would be followed immediately by the first private meeting, where the substantive policy discussions would begin in earnest. The European Defence Treaty negotiations that had prompted this entire arrangement would finally move from theoretical preparation to actual diplomatic engagement. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her final preparations. Sir Geoffrey entered with his customary punctuality, carrying a leather portfolio containing the morning's final briefing, materials, and diplomatic correspondence. "Royal Highness," he said with the formal courtesy that had characterized their interactions throughout the intensive preparation period. "President Macron's advance team has confirmed that he is particularly looking forward to the policy discussions. Ambassador Rousseau indicated that the LEC Palace views this visit as a potential breakthrough moment for European cooperation." Catherine felt a mixture of satisfaction and nervousness at this confirmation. The French delegation's positive anticipation validated the strategic reasoning behind their unconventional approach, but it also increased the pressure for the substantive discussions to produce meaningful results. "The media interest has exceeded all projections," Sir Geoffrey continued, consulting his notes. "International correspondents from 12 countries are covering the visit, and the diplomatic press corps has specifically requested extended access to briefings about the policy discussions." Unprecedented media attention reflected the broader international interest in this experimental approach to royal diplomacy, Catherine understood that her performance would be scrutinized not just by British and French observers, but by diplomatic communities throughout Europe who were watching to see whether traditional monarchy could adapt effectively to contemporary international relations. William appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his formal military uniform but maintaining a deliberately supporting role throughout the day's proceedings. His presence provided emotional support without undermining the concentrated focus that made this arrangement strategically valuable. "The French delegation has arrived at Heathrow," William reported. President Macron specifically mentioned his anticipation of substantial policy discussions during his brief airport interview. The French press corps seems genuinely excited about the potential for real diplomatic progress. Intelligence from the French side confirmed that both delegations were aligned in their expectations for the visit's outcome. The pressure to deliver meaningful results was enormous. But at least there would be no confusion about objectives or disappointment about the depth of engagement that had been promised. Catherine took a final look at her reflection, seeing not just her own face, but the weight of institutional responsibility that she had accepted. The next several hours would test every aspect of her preparation, from her understanding of complex policy details to her ability to navigate delicate diplomatic nuances while maintaining appropriate ceremonial protocols. At the time Sir Geoffrey announced, checking his pocket watch with the precision that had characterized every aspect of the preparation period as they made their way through the palace corridors toward the state apartments where the morning ceremonies would unfold. Catherine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a routine diplomatic scheduling discussion had evolved into a fundamental test of the monarchy's ability to adapt and remain relevant in contemporary international relations. The sounds of the ceremonial preparations could be heard echoing through the palace as household staff, protocol officers, and security personnel took their assigned positions for the morning's events. The familiar rhythms of state visit procedures provided comfort even as the underlying structure represented a dramatic departure from traditional approaches. President Macron's motorcade was visible through the palace windows as it approached the main entrance, flanked by the elaborate security arrangements that protected visiting heads of state. The pageantry and protocol that made state visits diplomatically significant would proceed exactly as planned, but the concentrated responsibility for managing both ceremonial and substantive elements rested entirely on Catherine's shoulders. Standing at the threshold of the state apartments, Catherine felt the culmination of weeks of intensive preparation crystallizing into this single moment of truth. The success or failure of this experimental approach would be determined over the next few hours, with consequences that would extend far beyond the immediate diplomatic objectives. The doors opened, revealing the assembled dignitaries' diplomatic corps and media representatives who would witness this unprecedented fusion of royal tradition and contemporary diplomacy. As Catherine stepped forward to greet President Macron and begin the most challenging diplomatic engagement of her career, she carried with her not just the hopes for successful policy discussions, but the future direction of royal involvement in Britain's international relationships. The experiment that had begun 3 weeks earlier in a private study at Windsor Castle was about to face its ultimate test, with the watching world ready to judge whether traditional monarchy could successfully adapt to the demands of 21st century diplomacy while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that made such institutions valuable to their nation's international standing. History would remember this day as either a successful innovation or a cautionary tale about the limits of constitutional adaptation, and the responsibility for determining which narrative would prevail rested entirely in Catherine's capable hands as she stepped forward to represent Britain with the full weight of centuries of royal tradition, supporting her unprecedented diplomatic mission.